Get ready for hot takes and insight from local industry experts in real estate, business, and lifestyle. He used to play ball with the Padres. He played hockey for the Lobos. Now they're crushing it in the real estate game. Together, they'll showcase the best of the Duke City. This is All About You, ABQ.
That's right. It's all about you, ABQ. Now, the goal of the show is to highlight the best of our city's industry experts in real estate, culture, and finance so that you walk away with some value and feeling inspired. Now, the way that we like to do that is to answer the questions you may have or interview the guests that you'd like to see. So I invite you to join the conversation. You can reach out using the hashtag above or join our email list to get some timely tips about our community and real estate market. Hey, I'm Skip Adams, owner-broker of Sold by Skip Real Estate here in Albuquerque, and you may have seen our team on HGTV or most recently on MSNBC nationwide. And we're kind of we're a small boutique brokerage here in town, but like I said, we're trying to grow and kind of incorporate all things Albuquerque and just have our foot in the community. So here's why you're going to want to stay tuned to this week's episode. I'm joined by Richard Lima, who's got a fantastic story, and he brings a lot of awareness to a few different things, right? He's a very inspirational guy, and he's going to be helping me guest hosting today. So Richard Lima, big friend of the show. You and I go back a long way, but I'm excited to have you here today, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and yeah, I mean, being here with you. I mean, where else would I rather be than on stage here with you, talking about cool things about Albuquerque, why I love this place, why I love living here, and there's just so many cool things to talk about.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about, first of all, your backstory, just so people understand kind of who Richard Lima is. But to speak to the fact that you love Albuquerque is interesting to me because you're here by way of North Carolina.
Yes.
Talk about how in the heck did you find our little city on a map in the 5th largest state in the country? What brought you to Albuquerque?
My wife brought us to Albuquerque. She is a nurse practitioner at the VA. We were living in North Carolina, and our daughter had grown up, and we were just like, okay, we're living in this big house, and we were like, let's downsize, let's go do something different, let's move somewhere different. But we wanted to be in an area where great outdoors, cycling, skiing, mountains, all just really cool place to just do so many things. And we ended up here because my wife did an interview for the VA here in Albuquerque, and immediately they wanted to hire her. So we flew out here in May of 2021, and immediately we knew that we wanted to live here. And
so a couple of the driving things that why people like Albuquerque, and you can speak to this, of course,
please,
being
yes,
somebody that's gone through the process of relocating, but cost of living. Normally we're at a little bit of a discount when it comes to cost of living as, compared to California or Denver, Dallas, Phoenix, our surrounding cities. So when you take a job here, you have to take that into consideration, right? Are you getting a pay raise? I mean, do you count the the cost of living here as well? So I mean, that had to be something you guys took into.
Oh, absolutely. So we actually moved from LA to North Carolina. So for us to see the cost difference from California to North Carolina to even here in New Mexico, we see that our dollar goes further here in the state of New Mexico. On top of that is, when we bought our house, the real estate here, it's more affordable. Mm-hmm. But what's great about living here is it's affordable, but you get the beauty of New Mexico. You get the beauty of Albuquerque. You've got skiing within, an hour and a half, sometimes even an hour. So Albuquerque gives you so many great things, a wonderful city with amazing restaurants, great breweries. The other thing that people don't understand about Albuquerque is it has a lot to offer. I mean, you've got the movie industries here. Mm-hmm. You've got Netflix and NBC, all their studios. They're constantly filming movies around here. You've got great industries. So Albuquerque offers a lot. We really didn't know that until once you get submerged into the city of Albuquerque, it really just grows on you and you become so involved and so submerged in the culture and the food. It's awesome.
What I like about you to talk about, outdoor activities, I know that you are one of these rise and shine guys. And what I love about you is that you have a huge Instagram following and a big presence when it comes to inspirational, get out of bed, get your day started type of content. And so when I first met you, I always tell you this story, but you were, talking to me and you're like, yeah, I'm usually out of bed at right around, 3 a.m. and starting my day and I, doing, my CrossFit workout, riding the bike. And I'm just thinking like, this guy's out of his mind. But the more you hang out with Richard, the more he, rubs off on you and you find yourself all of a sudden, I was like getting out of bed at 5, watching the sunrise, go, man, there is something to this way of life. So, so I want to talk more about that. And here's kind of why you want to stay tuned to this episode. We're going to go through and talk about Richard and why he's here, what he's promoting, a little bit more about his backstory and just kind of what he brings to the table and in the event that he's doing as far as cycling around town, bringing awareness to mental health issues. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and kind of his journey. And when I say he rode his bike across the USA, he has twice. The guy's a maniac. So stay tuned. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that story and we're going to meet the bicycle that he actually drove. We're going to look at how big the tent is, see if we can get 3 full-grown men inside this tent. I don't know why, but I just feel like that would be...
We can do it. Trust
something
me.
to do. And then stay tuned to the end of the show. And this is why everybody tunes in every week. Richard, I know this is your first time, but I just want to introduce you to Skip's Tips. So in the last segment, we're going to go over Skip's Tips, which are anything that save us time, make us more money, or allow us to just have more fun, whether that's in real life or real estate. So continuing on with you, Richard, I mean, when it comes to cycling, now I know you cycle around town and you always have that track my workout app playing and you'll post some of the rides that you've done. And when I say you cycle around town, How many miles is it around Albuquerque to make the loop?
It's called the Albuquerque, is it the fun loop or the activity loop? It's actually 50 miles. So what people, when they come to Albuquerque, one thing that people need to understand is Albuquerque is a very bicycle-friendly city. Lots of bike lanes, lots of bike paths. So what I do, and when you talk about saving money in Skip's Tips, is I love to ride my bicycle to the grocery store. I have a little trailer because we have such great cycling here that I could ride my bicycle to the grocery store. So I don't have to, hop in my car or hop in my truck and have to waste that gas. I can actually just ride 2-3 miles to the grocery store and, do some grocery shopping that way, or just go run errands. So Albuquerque is a very, very friendly bicycle city.
It is friendly to a degree, but talk about riding your bike in the wintertime. Because for me, there's nothing worse. And I don't know how you do it at 3-4 in the morning. Ride your bike in 30 to whatever degrees and a little bit of a breeze.
I don't ride that early when it's the wintertime. But what I do is it's all about the clothing. So for me, even though it's cold, I will still go out. There's times where it's just I don't really want to, but I just go out and I do it. But yeah, I mean, there's for me, even though it's cold, I just kind of get out there because I love being on my bicycle. And when you're riding around Albuquerque, it is so beautiful with the Sandia Mountains and all that, all the just beautiful nature here. It just makes riding so much fun.
One thing that I found is an easy way to combat the cold weather mornings, and I have to say this, and I'm proud. I'm going to share this with you. It's not. You may not think this is as cool as I do. In fact, I don't even think it's that cool, to be honest with you. But I did join the Peloton community. So if you want to cycle, bro, come at me, dude. Let's cycle. But I get around. So I am still up at 5, but now I'm in the basement in the warm confines of my home, and I get to cycle that way. And in fact, I did finish first place in my class.
Well, you know what, though? That's the thing is it doesn't matter if you're outside or if you're inside. As long as you're moving your body and you're doing something like that, that's awesome, because then again, on a Peloton, you can go out and you can compete against other people. Mm-hmm. And you can set your own records. You can set your own time. You can do it at any time. As long as you're doing something, That's what matters. I just like to be outside, and sometimes when it's cold, I just have to go out there and ride in the cold.
Well, you're more of a man than I am. In fact,
that's not.
wait, hold on. Sponsored by Trek, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in the next segment. But out of tragedy comes, the Phoenix and the birth of a new project you're working on called Never Ride Alone, which is a nonprofit organization that brings awareness to mental health. And I think it's a fantastic thing. And we're going to learn more about that, more about Trek bicycles and just your backstory about going coast to coast a couple of times. That's why you're going to want to stay tuned. And then following that, we're going to meet the bicycle. And of course, stay tuned for Skip's Tips. Welcome back to UABQ. I'm Skip Adams, owner of Sold by Skip Real Estate Brokerage here in Albuquerque. And we're joined today by Richard Lima, the co-host today, filling in for Grant Harvey. And we've had some great banter back and forth about just your backstory and kind of what you bring to the city of Albuquerque. But I want to continue a little bit more about, kind of the main project that you have going on. And I want to bring on our next guest is Brandon Estrada, co-founder of the organization Never Ride Alone. And Never Ride Alone was kind of birthed out of tragedy, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that moving forward. But Brant, welcome to the show, man. I just wanted to introduce you. I mean, you are UABQ. I mean, you're born and raised in New Mexico. You escaped a little bit to go to school, but what brought you back to the land of enchantment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Skip. Absolutely. This is great. New Mexicans love New Mexico. I always knew I was coming back, and I went away to get away, and I think coming back, I have a much greater appreciation for it, having kind of seen the world a little bit, but mostly family and just the great state, the potential we have, and everything else going on here is what brought me back. I always knew I was coming back at some point. It was just...
Well, you got to escape to, a pretty nice location. You went out to Loyola Marymount out in L.A. Now, most people don't get to have that opportunity, but you went from the dry desert Southwest to one of the most attractive places in the world, and then talk a little bit about your experience in California.
Yeah, sure. So Loyola Marymount, great school, beautiful campus right there next to the ocean. And it's funny because I'm from Gallup, New Mexico, and so town of 30,000, and I went to L.A., huge city, and I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. This is too big. And then when I came back, I was like, hold on, now this might be a little bit too small. You kind of get in that reversal. But Los Angeles was great experience. Went to school, studied economics, but New Mexicans were humble, and I had humble upbringings, and so with the glamour, the glitz, and all that stuff was never anything that grabbed me. And it's more about the culture and where you're from and who you're around. And eventually, LA just got a little bit too expensive. I never felt like I was going to get ahead there. You got to be a millionaire just about to come out there. And so, all that stuff, and then plus family and the closeness of Albuquerque. It's a big little town, and so I just wanted to come back to somewhere where I felt more of a community.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. This is just a side note for New Mexicans. Richard, I know you're not born and raised here, but when it comes to red or green chili, there's obviously two camps, okay? Yeah. But I have a hypothesis going that, and I want to see if I'm right, but I think that the locals prefer the red because there's like family recipes passed down for red chili. You have to cook it a different way, and it's more warms your body. And I think that green chili is for the tourists or the transplants because there's so much hype about green chili. So talk to me. Am I right here? Are you red or green?
Ooh, I'm actually green.
Oh,
I am green.
Shot holes in my whole
No, I could see that making sense because, like you said, more of a tradition. And I think green as an introductory chili is a lot more inviting and wild. So it's easier to eat. So
more mainstream.
I think you're spot on. I'm just more partial to green.
Okay.
For me, I grew up in a Mexican family. I grew up in LA, and so my grandmother always made some kind of salsa or some kind of chili. So for me, it all depends on the mood that I'm in. There's times I like red, there's times I like green. So I don't have a preference, and everyone always talks about Christmas, it's red and green over whatever dish that you're having. I like it all. So it just depends on what I'm in the mood for.
Running for office right
now.
No,
I know. I no.
There's no judgment.
No,
if you're a green chili guy.
No, but like for me, it like my grandmother would make homemade tortillas. Everything was made homemade.
Yeah.
So if she had red kind of salsa or some kind of chili, that's what you ate, but it was really good. Same with the green. So for me, just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. So I like it both.
I get that. Cold weather, you got to go with the red chili because it warms you up a little bit.
Yeah.
In fact, and then we go always, sorry, I know this is because sidetracking, but my wife was an import from California. I brought her out here from San Diego. It turns out there's not a lot of blonde girls in Albuquerque, so I had to import, right? But
You're starting a movement.
yeah, starting my own organization. In California, they have pozole, which is Pozole, which is an offshoot of what we're used to as pozole with an S. And so this is like a huge point of contention in our household. I'm like, pozole is not a thing. Like, keep your pozole out of here. And I don't know, am I crazy again? Are you shooting holes in this?
No, you're not crazy for that. It's funny because when I was younger, my parents are from Los Angeles, so we'd always go out there to eat. And there's a time we went to go eat. We sat at a Mexican restaurant, probably one of my first times as an adult. And they asked me red or green, and they said red or green sauce. It was very confusing. Of course, my mind went to red or green chili, and I said red, and it came out with this like canned, watery, whatever
Tomato sauce,
yeah, which it was good, but it's funny because it's completely different.
Yeah.
In Mexico, food is a culture all its own. It's not Mexican food. It's not Tex-Mex. It's New Mexican food.
And that's the other thing too is you don't go out to Mexican food, you go out to New Mexican food, or you don't confuse the two.
No.
So
It's apples and oranges. It is.
Yeah.
There's a couple of Mexican restaurants that I've seen come and go in town, and they're bringing it. They try and bring in Baja Mexico or California Mexico or Mexican food into New Mexico, and it just doesn't last. It doesn't. I mean, it's all just pico de gallo and onions, and for me, it doesn't work. But
Well, and that's the thing is growing up in LA, it was straight Mexican food. We didn't have New Mexican food. So for us and for me, with my grandmother and living in LA, it was just straight, every Sunday it was menudo. We had homemade menudo, homemade tortillas. So for us, it was, Sunday was the best because that's when grandma, really did all the cooking and we ate good foods. So.
Well, that's why this is the best time of year. You get the warm pozole, red chili, hang out by the Christmas tree.
Listen, New Mexico has some of the best food. I've lived all over this country. I've lived in LA. I've lived in North Carolina. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in so many places. Albuquerque is underrated when it comes to food.
Well, here's what you have to be careful of. Because the food is so good, and I'll give you the secret tip to our local recipes here, is you just get a handful of lard and just rub it all over everything, right? So you have to be very careful. A lot of it is deep fried, tortillas, sopapillas. But you, sponsored by Trek Bicycles, riding bikes, doing 50-mile loops at 4 a.m, have the ability, and that was one of the first things you told me when we went out to lunch, is that you said you got a little bit of a sweet tooth. And for lunch, he ordered a chocolate cake, an apple pie, a scoop of ice cream. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I've already burned like 2,500 calories, so I have to, I can eat whatever I want.
It's funny because at the end of his first ride, I drove out to California to pick him up. And we were headed back, and we were trying to get out of LA, and we got some dinner, and there's, I think, crumble cookies there. And so he's like, oh, I'm going to get some for the ride. So I thought we were going to get like a cookie or so, and he buys 6 cookies, 3 for each of us. They're this big.
Yeah, fat boys.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to eat that over like 2 days. He killed 2 of them.
I'm burning 10,000 calories a day
across America, so he should afford it. But that's when I learned.
And we had pizza just before that. So
About his particular sweet tooth when he just downed 2 of those right away.
But my diet's much different when I'm riding across the country because it's hard for me to find food. But when I'm at home, my diet's super clean. So it's much different than when I'm riding across the country.
So let's talk a little bit more about why we're here and talk a little bit about being sponsored by Trek. The organization that you guys started, Never Ride Alone. What's the thesis behind it, and how did it start?
It started, I lost my brother to suicide in April. And when I lost my brother, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't sit on my hands. I wanted to do something about suicide and mental illness. I didn't know a lot about mental illness or suicide. So what I did was after I went to my brother's services in California, my wife and I came back and I said, I've got to do something. So I contacted NAMI Albuquerque and
Talk a little bit about NAMI. What is NAMI?
Brandon would be a better person to actually tell more about what NAMI is exactly. So
Sure. So NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, it's a national nonprofit. We're the Albuquerque affiliate, and we do resources, education, outreach, and peer support groups. That's the biggest thing we want the community to know about is we do have peer support groups for individuals with struggling with mental illness or family members of those struggling with mental illness. And so, with Never Ride Alone, NAMI's one of their slogans is you are not alone, because even though mental health challenges can feel very isolated, there's chances are somebody else is going through something that is experiencing the same thing you are. And so Never Ride Alone was a play on that you're not alone, and never ride alone, that, that we can connect with communities across the country and just spread the message about suicide awareness, prevention. And so with NAMI was kind of the catalyst to the mental illness community that we wanted to stay a part of.
Yeah. And, you were talking about some pretty wild stats previously, and you were talking about on your ride. So to bring awareness to NAMI, to Never Ride Alone, you had the idea to hop on a bike, get sponsored, first of all, hop on a bike, and just start going coast to coast. I mean, give me, how on earth do you have the mental capacity to take on that challenge?
For me, I'm an endurance athlete, so it was right up my alley. But I knew that the most important thing was to bring awareness to mental illness and suicide. Like I said, after losing my brother, and really getting to see how prevalent suicide is and how prevalent mental illness is in this country, I knew I had to do something. So I had to do something that really brought attention to this cause that we were trying to bring awareness to, which is the mental illness and suicide part of it. And riding a bicycle, what riding a bicycle did for the cause was it allowed me to go from town to town, whether it was a town of 50 or a city as big as St. Louis. So when I would go through town, from town to town, people would see my bicycle, see all these bags on it. Why are you here in the middle of Kansas? Why are you riding your bicycle? And then when I would tell them that I'm riding for mental illness and suicide, immediately they would open up to me and say, I just lost a loved one to suicide, or I'm dealing with a loved one with mental illness. And it really brought people out to really talk about mental illness and suicide. And I had many people tell me, I had never spoken about my dealings with suicide or mental illness until I met you. And so, it was something that I had to do, but I knew that riding across the country, being able to talk to people, not by car, not by motorcycle, but by bicycle, it really, really opened my eyes up to see how prevalent mental illness and suicide.
Well, that is your language, and I can appreciate that. And I think we have a couple of clips of you actually riding across the country. And not only were you doing that and people stopping you, you were getting fantastical. You're getting exceptional media coverage, and I know that you guys were working in tandem. Talk a little bit about how your strategy of setting up some of these rides and these news interviews as well.
Sure. So Richard was on the bike, and I was kind of the home front to keep things moving. And the ride has always been him. It's been important that the logistics of getting around are his. He's the one out there, and so we would just communicate every single day, morning to night, kind of where he's at, where he's going, where he's headed, trying to stay about 2 to 3 days ahead of him. And then just picking out the next town, finding a Trek store. We want to stay affiliated with them since they gave him the bike and they're sponsoring all his mechanics and everything. And then, of course, with NAMI, we'd reach out to NAMI and we'd just bring them together. Once we had the event plan, I have a press release that I would send out to the local media and cross our fingers that somebody showed up. And so it was really just communication and staying ahead of him and trying to put the word out there enough that somebody picked it up. And luckily we did. So we did 11 stops across the country, and we got 7 news coverages out of it. So we were pretty successful in spreading the word through media.
Well, not only regular media, but social media. And one thing that you became famous for is the tent talks.
Yes.
You were in a situation where you didn't always get to stay at 5-star hotels. I mean, you have a big, a muddy bike that's going across the country. You haven't showered in a couple of days. Talk about where you were sleeping and the birth of tent talks.
Well, what happened was, riding across the country, especially in the summertime, when you're going across Missouri, Southern Illinois, Southern Indiana, Kansas, in June and July, it's 113 degrees, and the humidity is off the charts. It's really, really hot. So for me, it was, staying in a tent, even though it's 11 o'clock at night, it's still 100 degrees outside. So I would be sitting in my tent, literally dripping sweat. And my sleeping pad has, if anybody's familiar with camping and you sleep in a tent, a sleeping pad has these little divots in it. Well, that would get filled up with sweat. And people would go, why didn't you just go outside of your tent? Well, the mosquitoes were so bad that I couldn't go outside of my tent because I would just literally get eaten up. So I would sit in my tent just sweating. But the thing was I started Richard's Tent Talk, which was I wanted to go live on my Instagram and have people ask me questions about my day that I just had or about the ride. And I was getting people from all over the world that were tuning in. It was 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, and no matter what time zone I was in, if I had the only time I wouldn't go live is if I didn't have reception, because sometimes I was in the middle of nowhere. But what I would do is I would go live, and it was Richard's Tent Talk, and people would come and join in live, and I could see the questions coming in, and so I was answering people's questions live as I was pedaling across the country.
So, big social media star, had plenty of press coverage for the ride across the country. Coming up in the next segment, here's why you're going to want to stay tuned. We're going to meet the real star of the show, the Trek bicycle that took you coast to coast, but then also was auctioned off and then magically returned. And we're joined by Brandon and Richard, Never Ride Alone, an organization that kind of brings awareness to mental illness, suicide prevention. And we talked a little bit in the first 2 segments about your ride across the country, what inspired it. And I think it's important to go ahead and bring on the star of the show, the Trek bicycle that took you coast to coast. Now, what was the grand total of miles that you rode?
The first ride was 4,608 miles, and the second ride was from Chicago to San Diego, was a little over 2,600 miles.
2,600 miles.
Yes.
And I remember watching you finished across the Santa Monica Pier was one of your last stops?
That was the first ride. My end point was the Santa Monica Pier. The second ride was San Diego.
It's supposed to be Route 66 to Santa Monica.
Yes.
We rerouted.
You got caught in the snow a couple of times. I remember your tent talks. It was just nothing but you just shivering and just saying,
yeah. I hit headwinds from Chicago all the way till I got to Albuquerque, but it got really bad when I got to Santa Rosa, Tucumcari, and then Klein's Corners. It was a mess. It was snow, wind, 45 mile an hour, crosswind. So I had to divert down to Las Cruces and go to the southern route.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the bike, the setup. What's the grand total of weight? Have you weighed?
It's about 55, 60 pounds with water, food, clothes, everything on here. My tent, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, sleeping pillow is in here. I've got some clothes in here along with some bike tools. I've got tubes. I have place for my food. So total weight is about 55, 60 pounds. And that's the other thing that people don't understand. I'm not pedaling just a normal empty bicycle. I'm pedaling a bicycle that's 55, 60 pounds over the Colorado Rockies, over the Teton Pass. So 10, 12 hours on a bike that weighs 55, 60 pounds.
And I don't know if we can get a zoom shot of this seat, though. I mean, you must look at. I'm not saying you have an ass made of steel, but you got to have something. I mean, this thing is not comfortable.
It is extremely comfortable. The thing is the more you ride, the more comfortable it gets. So even though the seat's small, to some people, it's extremely comfortable for me.
So talk a little bit more about, when you say you packed away your food, are you just living on granola bars?
Well, no, what I would do is I would go through each town. It depends on the town. Some towns are food deserts. I would have the choice of a gas station or maybe a Dollar General. If I was lucky, I got a Subway. And Subway was my vegetables because some of these towns don't have anything. I'm literally food desert. So I would get a lot of my food from the gas station, but I would try to make the best choices I could as far as the healthiest foods I could.
So talk a little bit more about the organization. It's Never Ride Alone, and I know that piggybacks off of, talk a little bit more about the connection there.
Sure. So Never Ride Alone, associated with NAMI. I sit on the board of directors for NAMI Albuquerque, which is our connection to them. And so Never Ride Alone, NAMI's motto, you are not alone. We just want to spread awareness and prevention. The main tool we have against suicide is outreach. Again, there's no top-down solution, so the more people we can inform to be on the lookout with their friends, their families, the more we can try to catch them. And intervention is key. Catching those people who are thinking about it. We know that a lot of them show warning signs, and so it's about education and encouraging people to have the courage to speak up to their friends for themselves and know that there's help. And so it's really just a means of communicating across the country to rural areas, big cities, that there is help and you're not alone.
So out there, if you have friends or family who could benefit from the type of service and support that these gentlemen are providing, let us know. How do we reach out to you?
Sure. So we have a website, neverridealone.org. You can reach out through an email through there, but Instagram right now is the best way to either Richard Lima 1 or Never Ride Alone USA. On Instagram, that's probably the easiest way to get directly to us. We're happy to come speak. We're looking to do a lot of events. We have big plans for riding events and speaking events, and that's all to come this year. So you can follow us there, but you can reach out to those places as well.
Well, I'm excited you guys joined us. You guys are everything that is you, ABQ, right? Supporting the community, bringing out the best of what we have to offer here. But to be honest, guys, there's really only one thing that could top this episode. And stay tuned for our next segment. Everybody together, it's Skip Tips! 4 factors that sellers need to be aware of when they go to sell their homes. The first thing, let's talk about financing methods. Did you know as a seller, you are allowed to discriminate against your buyer? Yeah. The only thing that you can discriminate against is their financing method. So before you put your home on the market, decide, are you looking for cash buyers, conventional, strong down payment, and kind of really dive into the pros and cons of each. You know, with a cash buyer, you want to make sure you have that proof of funds. With a finance buyer, you want to see that pre-qualification letter. The next thing you want to know as a seller is look at the strength or the size of their earnest money deposit, okay? If someone's only putting down $300 of earnest money deposit, chances are they're not really committed to the deal. You want to see 1 to 2% of the purchase price put down as the earnest money deposit. Now remember, if the buyer happens to default or fails to perform on the contract, you as a seller may be entitled to that earnest money deposit. So make sure you get a good one. The next thing that you want to know is when you're accepting offers on your property, you want to find a property that has not just the highest price, but the best terms, the fewest contingencies. Now, contingencies are milestones in the contract that the buyer has to perform, whether that's the appraisal contingency, the insurance contingency, inspection contingency, earnest money contingency, all these things are contingencies. So the fewer those hurdles that the buyer has, the stronger the offer and the better the terms are for the seller. So the last thing you want to consider before putting your home on the market is your timeline. Do you need a quick close? Do you have to be out of the house before Christmas? Or do you need an extended close? Do you need a rent back after close? These are all things that you want to talk about up front so that you can get your timelines down and the best terms when making your contract go through. So that is this week's Skip's Tips, and I want to thank you guys for tuning into the show this week. Richard and Brandon from Never Ride Alone, fantastic story. Thank you guys for stopping by and sharing. And again, you can find our show every Wednesday night at 7 and Sunday at 9 a.m. Thanks for sticking in. Thanks for tuning in and sticking around. This is all about you, ABQ.